What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and with Loki exploring the multiverse and all that kind of stuff, here on Geek Culture Explained, I'm going to give you guys a rundown on how the multiverse works in Marvel Comics. Now, if you guys want a more in-depth explanation here, I will link you guys to Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers at Comics Explained, which will give you an explanation in a far more in-depth way over the course of, I don't know, something like 9 hours. So the basic premise of a universe, you guys don't need explained to you, right? You guys understand that. Galaxies, solar systems, stars, planets, life. But beyond that, what you have are a couple different things. You've got cosmic entities, you've got pocket dimensions, and you've got a place called the Dimension of Manifestations, which is incredibly important. So universes in Marvel Comics are infinite, insofar as they can stretch into infinity. So the way these things work is, of course, you have a Big Bang, and that's what creates a universe. If a Big Bang expands the universe outward, the Big Crunch starts pulling it inward. And then once it reaches that final point, it'll just condense down into an infinitely small space and explode outward in a Big Bang, giving birth to a new universe. But the reason why Marvel says universes are infinite is because until it reaches that point where it starts to contract, the universe can just keep going and going and going. There's no limit to how big a universe can get. And that's why you have some universes that are actually bigger than others in Marvel Comics. Now, within universes, you have a litany of pocket dimensions, some of which are easily accessible and some of which can only be accessible through special circumstances. Something like Asgard requires a wormhole, the Bifrost Bridge, for example, to access that. So you can't get in a ship and just start flying in a forward direction across the universe and eventually reach Asgard. You have to actually pass through a dimensional barrier to enter into that pocket dimension. The Dark Dimension. This is an interesting case. The Dark Dimension was originally just a large singular place. Somewhere along the line, it was never really explained to us why. All we know is that there was just some kind of a conflict that basically shattered the Dark Dimension into a series of other pocket dimensions. And so these pocket dimensions gave us beings like Mephisto and Nightmare and so on and so forth. They're called the Splinter Realms. Sometimes they're called the Nightmare Realms or the Dream Dimensions or the Hell Realms or whatever the case is. Regardless of how you slice it, that's where those little individual places come from. Now, beyond these small little pocket dimensions, you have cosmic entities. And cosmic entities are basically ideas given form. So you know when you get hungry, you have like a kind of pain in your stomach? Imagine you didn't get that. And imagine a being just appeared to you and said, "You're hungry. It's time for you to eat." And that's when you knew you were hungry. That's how cosmic entities work. Now, cosmic entities, as they appear in Marvel Comics, they can just appear in a physical form if they want to, but most times they don't. Instead, what they do is they travel to a realm called the Dimension of Manifestations, which is ran by a being named Anthropomorpho. And Anthropomorpho creates what are called M-bodies, which are basically physical forms that the essence or the idea of the cosmic entity basically fills, and then they appear in the Marvel Universe. Now, there's all kinds of cosmic entities, so we're not going to run over all of them here, but the more significant ones are like Eternity and Infinity. Eternity represents time, and Infinity represents space. Eternity being how long a universe could potentially go on for, and Infinity representing how much space the universe could actually occupy. Beyond that, you have guys like the Stranger, you've got Eon. Galactus is considered a cosmic entity, even though he originated from a mortal being that basically died with his previous universe and then merged with that universe's version of Eternity. But at the end of the day, it all still counts. Now, something to know is that by and large, every universe has this form and function. Every universe has its own version of Asgard. Every universe has its own version of Dormammu, its own Eternity, its own Infinity. It has its own individual variations of cosmic entities like Galactus, its own pocket dimensions, all that kind of stuff. And then you move into a much larger scope. The multiverse, as you guys guess, is a combination of different universes, but there are beings out there that are unique to the multiverse itself. So with this multiverse, you have the Living Tribunal. Now, the role of the Living Tribunal has shifted a lot over the years in Marvel Comics. Originally, it was just maintaining magical balance in any one particular universe. Over the years, the Tribunal's role has shifted a lot, where it's basically just kind of become a plot device, right? Where the Living Tribunal just shows up if the story calls for him, and that's basically it. And so from there, you go into cosmic entities in relation to the multiverse. That if somebody like Eternity is basically the answer to the question, what if the universe could get up and walk around? That the multiversal Eternity is basically the same way. That the multiversal Eternity represents the infinite expanse of the multiverse itself. If the multiverse could get up and walk around, it would be the multiversal Eternity. You've also got a few other beings out there like Oblivion. Oblivion's a really interesting case because Marvel's never really given us a definitive example of how powerful Oblivion is. It's usually just fans referencing the role Oblivion plays within Marvel Comics as an indication of how powerful it is, and rightfully so. Oblivion basically represents the nothingness between the death and rebirth of everything. And so the idea is that Oblivion is incapable of dying. Depending on what fan you talk to, true, some people will say Oblivion is second to the one above all. The one above all, of course, being the being that created everything in existence. Now, this begs the question, if something like the Bifrost allows a person in a universe to travel to a pocket dimension within that universe, is there something that allows a person to leave their universe and travel to another universe? And the answer is yes. And there's actually quite a few of these. So you do have things like the Florida Everglades. I know, it's weird. And then you have things like the Crossroads, you have stuff like the M'Kraan Crystal, and even the Negative Zone to a degree. When it comes to these various things, they're depicted in different ways. The Crossroads, for example, is depicted as a whole host of winding paths, that the Florida Everglades, when you pass into that nexus of reality, you basically get the same thing. The Florida Everglades are kind of interesting because they're guarded by the Man-Thing. And so when you approach the Man-Thing swamp, he'll touch you. And if you feel fear, it'll incinerate you. If you feel no fear, you'll be allowed to pass. When it comes to something like the M'Kraan Crystal, this is quite literally a crystal that exists out there in the universe, and that every universe has its own version of the M'Kraan Crystal. Think of it as something akin to a hallway of doors. Now, if you actually enter the M'Kraan Crystal, you'll actually encounter what's called the White Hot Room, which is where only individuals who are perfect hosts for the Phoenix Force can actually reside. Jean Grey was a really good example of that. But these individual places can be accessed through magical means. A person who can alter reality can do it. These individuals are basically able to kind of pass through these different barriers, with the exception of the Nexus of Realities and the Man-Thing Swamp. Anybody can go through there. But once you access these different places, you can go to different universes. Now, the biggest issue that you have here is, unless you're somebody who's experienced in doing it, like the Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, or something like that, you can get lost, because it's not as though you go into this hallway of doors within the M'Kraan Crystal, basically, and there's like numbers that label every single universe. You could literally spend just infinite amounts of time passing from one universe to the next and never get to where you need to be. And if you're not keeping track of where you've been, you'll never get back to your home universe. And so from there, you go into the various multiversal organizations themselves. And again, we're not going to cover all of them here. The video on Comics Explained will run through a lot of that stuff, but to highlight some of the finer points, as most of you guys know, the Timekeepers and the Time Variance Authority exist on a multiversal level. The roles that the Timekeepers and the TVA play in Marvel Comics are basically identical to the roles of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A big difference is that the Timekeepers exist to ensure they actually come into existence, so they're kind of dicks and they're usually pretty selfish. Then you've got things like the Starlight Citadel in Otherworld, which is basically kind of a gateway to other realities, and it's essentially the home to the Captain Britain Corps. The Captain Britain Corps is basically a multiversal team. So there's one Captain Britain in every single universe that's designed to protect that universe, which is really kind of a crappy role because the Captain Britain Corps, those guys aren't very powerful. But then you've got organizations like the Exiles, which are designed to travel around the multiverse facing off against various threats, and it's actually a team consisting of various individuals from different universes. You've got the Temporal Empire of Kang the Conqueror. So basically, whenever Kang goes back in time in Marvel Comics, traveling into the past is not enough to create an alternate reality. You have to actually do something. And so there are stories where Kang the Conqueror has fought against the Avengers. What this does is it splits off a litany of alternate realities where he defeated all of the Avengers, he defeated only half the Avengers, he defeated one Avenger, and then was defeated by the rest. Like, there's all kinds of different universes based on that. And so the Temporal Empire of Kang is not really a temporal empire ruled by one particular person. It's a giant multiversal empire ruled by virtually every version of Kang that's out there, and they're largely referred to as the Council of Kangs. And then you've got places like Limbo, which is where Immortus resides, and so on and so forth. But the multiverse is a pretty complex place, and there's a lot that goes on there in the realm of Marvel Comics. So again, if you guys want to learn more about this stuff with regards to the multiverse and Marvel Comics, make sure you check out the video in the description, which will link you to Comics Explained, which will run over all that stuff and make it easier for you guys to grasp. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.